Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Dion Griffith. I'm an MSW practicum student here at Youth Care, and this is my presentation regarding the Youth Action Board, and so here we go. So basically I explore the what, the why, and the how for the Youth Action Board. What is a Youth Action Board? Why should Youth Care implement a Youth Action Board, and how is that accomplished? The Youth Action Board is basically a type of community participatory action or youth participatory action. And youth action boards are examples of community participatory action. Historically, youth and young adults, especially marginalized youth, have been denied a voice in democracy. The Youth Action Board challenges the narrative that young people cannot participate in decisions that affect them and empowers them to have a voice in democracy. So why should we start a YAB? There are several benefits of a YAB, Youth Action Board. So when I say YAB, I'm referring to a Youth Action Board. There is evidence that Youth Action Boards enhance social development for the young people involved while fostering intergenerational relationships. Not only do the young people benefit, but they give back to the greater community and other generations through a teaching and learning process of reciprocity. Moreover, literature supports that youth action boards act as an intervention by fostering skill development. Some of the skills that are garnered in the youth action board process include cognitive and emotional competencies, interpersonal skills, and youth awareness of their democratic rights. Finally, qualitative and quantitative evidence indicates that participation in YABs leads to housing stability, academic success, and employment. So I interviewed several agencies about, how do they implement their youth action boards, and, what was their biggest, suggestions and takeaways for how we might go about implementing a youth action board. And so one of the agencies that I interviewed was the National Network for Youth, and they suggested the cascading mentoring model. And that model can be basically summarized as follows. The cascading mentoring model is a model introduced by the National Network for Youth, utilized in their Youth Action Council. The program director oversees the whole project and supports the program facilitator. The program facilitator leads the implementation of the project and trains youth participants. Youth participants are recruited to be youth leaders. Youth leaders work with the program lead and program facilitator to mentor other youth participants. In this way, there is a co-learning between the director and staff that reaches the youth, and then in the spirit of reciprocity, returns to the staff. So, let's see here. There's several other key points that I learned from these interviews. This is one example. Should we interview the youth? So some agencies choose to interview their applicant pool to narrow the number of applicants and to ensure a particular skill set in their youth action board. Benefits of using an interview is the agency can select candidates that meet certain skill sets. Other agencies choose not to interview, and note that this is that was the National Network for Youth, for example, does not use an interview. And it was noted that this is to maintain a low barrier and to be more inclusive, and that basically, it's to help the youth to gain skills. Ultimately, the Youth Action Board. I mean, there is an agenda. However, the biggest takeaway is for the youth, and that is to help them gain skills. And even if they weren't to follow or be successful at an interview, those same youth would benefit from the process and of skill building through the Youth Action Board process. So that's the benefit of having no interview. So let's see here. So for compensation and the reciprocity piece, It is important to, make sure to compensate the youth to kind of minimize tokenism and, to give back to the youth what they've, are giving to the agency. And so some suggestions for compensation reciprocity is that reciprocity includes professional development, interview skills, resume creation, networking, and providing educational seminars. Also, inviting near peers such as college students or graduate and medical students to share their experience is beneficial to the Youth Action Board participants. Stipends are imperative to ensure that youth are adequately compensated and, as I said, to diminish tokenism. So the next thing that we'll talk about here is determining the Youth Action Board values and norms. There's a couple of different philosophies on this. Some agencies like to outline the values and norms. For example, does a youth have to attend so many meetings in order to be compensated? Or what happens if they don't participate or they're disruptive or any of those things? Sometimes the agency likes to outline that. But this is kind of an argument for why the youth should determine the values and norms. So basically, when youth lead values and norms, they are accountable for their own process. And this is in the true spirit of the youth-led action boards. In this way, the agency allows the youth to design the values and accountability requirements of the group. Doing so changes the narrative that youth cannot be accountable for their own lives and the rules that affect them. So that they learn from that as well. And now, diversity and inclusion. For the development of an inclusive and equitable YAB, it is important to have representation for each demographic served by the agency. If the agency represents the population of a city, a youth from each city district should be included. Also, it is critical to include youth from diverse backgrounds, socioeconomic, racial, sexual orientation, gender identities, ethnicity, and cultural identities. So this is something to take into consideration when developing a youth action board. So here is some information about how many youth participate in the Youth Action Board. The group size is depending on the agenda and values of the group. So if you want to invest more in each youth individually, maybe a smaller group might be helpful. If you want to foster relationships between the youth, having a kind of a medium-sized group might work. That way, you can break them off into pairs and then they can develop relationships there in small groups within the group. And then also having 15 to 20 youths can be used for a project that lasts a year or more and that requires a variety of perspectives. Excuse me. So, youth participatory action research. So this is a type of method for a youth action board. There are different philosophies and methods, but this particular method teaches the youth to utilize a research perspective when implementing their interests in the Youth Action Board. So for example, here, I'll just read what it says here in my notes, is that in youth participatory action, youth take the agenda of the Youth Action Board and implement research strategies to determine the best course of action, and then they advise the agency. First, the participants are trained in research methods such as using scholarly articles to support their conclusions. So there's kind of a learning and teaching process there. Then the youth analyze the data, create presentations and products to share to assist them with their advocacy. In this model, youth decide the research questions, design, and/or methods. So there's a portion of teaching and learning where they learn about how to do the research, and then they decide the questions and go off and do the research with some mentoring piece by the staff that are responsible for the group and the youth leaders. So let's see here. Who speaks for the Youth Action Board? It is important to determine who will speak for the Youth Action Board regarding a particular agenda. To do this, youth whose lived experience addresses the legislative agenda being proposed is an effective model. So that's just, one argument for, who speaks for the Youth Action Board. Ultimately, it is important to have somebody who can speak to the agenda of the agency or the particular agenda that the youth have outlined. So basically, this summary has explained, what a Youth Action Board is and why Youth Care should develop a Youth Action Board and how it goes about developing a Youth Action Board. So basically, thank you so much for listening, and here are my references. Thank you.